Odds are you've never seen this before. It's the intro video to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, a party fighter using characters from the PlayStation library as well as third-party characters. It released on November 20th of 2012, and almost immediately after its release began to garner a lot of flack from people. Over the years, the attitude towards the game grew more and more hostile to the point where the mere mention of the game comes off as a joke. But why did that happen? How did an innocent game become so despised in the gaming community? In this video, I will do my best to attempt to explain some of the criticisms while also highlighting a lot of the good points often overlooked when people talk about the game in order to try and convince people to give this game the second look it deserves. Now, to kick this video off, I have to bring this up. Yes, the game is similar to Smash Bros. It has characters from different franchises coming together and fighting on stages from various games. Personally, I believe the similarity is one of the largest reasons All-Stars receives so much flack from people. I remember before the game came out, everyone was saying how All-Stars would suck because it was just going to be a Smash Bros. Ripoff. Then the game came out, and it played differently than Smash Bros. The game definitely doesn't feel as tight as Smash Bros. Does, and feels a little weird sometimes, but it's still very fun. And instead of knocking people off the side of the stage, you had to use super moves to knock them out. The problem with this was the fact that some characters definitely had better super moves than others, so they were obviously better to use if you were looking to win. The game is fun to play, and I love it, but I will be the first to admit you will not see it in any tournaments anytime soon. So, the game comes out and people find out it plays differently than Smash Bros. So now after months of people saying it would suck because it was just a clone, now people said, well, the game sucks because it should have just been a Smash Bros. Clone. I mean, if they're going to copy Nintendo, they should just own up to it. People were soured on this game before it even came out, and then just shifted the logic of their opinion afterwards to fit with the reality that they actually tried to do something different and did a pretty decent job. Another problem with this comparison is the fact that when All-Stars released, Smash Bros. Was on its third entry, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which came out 4 years prior in 2008. So at the time All-Stars was released, not only was Smash Bros. On its third entry, but it had been around for 13 years since the first game came out for the Nintendo 64 back in 1999. Nintendo had a lot of time to polish and refine their series by the time All-Stars came out. Something often overlooked about All-Stars is the fact that not only was it the first entry in a new series that was trying to have its own identity, but it was also the very first game made by Superbot Entertainment, and so far the only game they've ever made. When you look at just how much time Smash had to grow through the years compared to All-Stars, no wonder it feels better. And before I'm painted as some kind of Sony shill, I have owned every Smash Bros. Game since Melee. I bought a Wii U for Smash Bros. And I bought a Switch for Smash Bros. Also, keep in mind, I just said that Smash Bros. Had tighter gameplay, which is, pretty important for a video game. Once again, All-Stars is not perfect, and you won't see it in any tournaments, but it was never made to be a tournament game. The game is made to be fun. And that's it. It never tries to be anything it's not. It's a goofy little fighter you play with your friends, and that's it. And if you actually play the game, you'll find that despite the obvious but not egregious gameplay flaws, the game has a lot of charm to it that Smash Bros. Lacks. And yes, I know, me claiming that All-Stars does something better than Smash is sacrilege, but let me make my case with two important points. Point 1. Art direction. As beautiful as Smash Bros. Can be, there's always something about it that has bugged me. The characters tend to conform to a singular Smash Bros. Art style decided for the game. The same thing happens to the stages as well a lot of the time, where they're made to go in line with the art style choices that were made for the specific game. Whereas in All-Stars, every character looks straight from their game. Kratos and Nathan Drake have the realistic look of their series, while characters like Parappa, Sly Cooper, and Ratchet retain their cartoony style, which is great. It makes the characters actually feel like they were plucked straight out of their games. Same thing with the stages. Every stage looks like it was taken straight from whatever game it was from and adds to the overall crossover feel the game wants to give off, which brings me to my next point. Point 2. PlayStation All-Stars is actually a crossover. Let me tell you, I am a sucker for crossovers. I cannot get enough of them. As fun as Smash Bros. Can be, it's honestly not much of a crossover. The characters are just kind of in the same place at the same time, and that's it. In my mind, a crossover requires genuine interaction, as well as other little things that all combine to give a feeling of true crossover cohesion. For example, All-Stars has an arcade mode where you go through a bunch of fights, just like any other arcade mode from any other game where you fight people. Every character's arcade mode has its own unique intro explaining why they're there. Then, in the style of a standard 2D fighter like Street Fighter, there's a rival cutscene in the middle of the arcade mode where we see a character paired off against another and they actually interact with each other.
Another demon sent by this so-called god. He can join the rest.
My ice cream cone. That was a mistake, buddy.
A mistake I can correct, if you like.
Maybe you didn't hear me, friend. There's a debt here, and I'm ready to settle up.
Stand aside.
Pick that up and pay for it.
The ghost of Sparta bends to no mortal.
Then, after beating the boss, who is an abandoned PlayStation mascot from 1995, Polygon Man, who is seeking revenge on the modern mascots after getting abandoned, there's an outro where we get the characters' thoughts on what they just went through. The closest Smash Bros. Ever got to anything like this was Subspace Emissary, which they did in Brawl, and then never again, even though everyone loved it. It was cool, because you got to see the characters interacting with each other, but the downside was they never talked, so there wasn't that much interaction besides the occasional glance or pat on the back. I chalk that up to most Nintendo characters not talking in their own games, so whatever, no big deal. But it doesn't just stop at some cutscenes. Like I said earlier, the fact that everyone looks straight from their own games really adds to the feeling that they came from their own worlds, and with the stages, like the characters, they all look straight from their own games too. But unlike the characters, each stage has another feature that adds to the crossover feeling. At a point during the match, parts from another series will invade the arena you're currently on and mix things up a little bit. It's mostly background flavor, but it also helps add to the crossover feeling. It makes it really feel like that these worlds are colliding, and whether you care about the games or not, you have to admit, it's a pretty neat thing to have. If Smash Bros. Had something like that, I think it'd be incredible. Now that I've made the case for what the game does better, I think it's time to move on to what may be the most controversial part of the game: the roster. This is where I believe most of the double standards come from. Many people will often use the roster to make fun of the game, but many of the things they make fun of are also done in Smash games but ignored, in my opinion, just because it's Smash. For instance, people love to poo-poo on the fact that there are vastly different characters in the roster, like, oh wow, Kratos versus Sackboy, that's very exciting, very cool, whose idea was that? But when it comes to Smash Bros, everyone says, oh boy, Solid Snake versus Duck Hunt Dog. I love how different the characters are. Everyone's from a bunch of different places and they're fighting. It's so crazy. People will also criticize some of the roster additions simply for being there. The characters Naruto and Fat Princess are the targets of the most derision, as people will often say that no one really cares about the games they're from, Heavenly Sword and Fat Princess. Every time a Smash Bros game has come out for the past few iterations, there were always two characters that are among the most requested. Geno. Oh, you know that Geno. Oh, you know the one from Super Mario RPG? He only appeared in that one game and then never again? Oh, also Isaac. Well, you know Isaac. Well, from Golden Sun, the game that everyone always talks about. People love to poo-poo on All-Stars having some smaller characters in their game, but also demand for smaller characters to be put into Smash, and no one bats an eye. Now, I will say, the fact that Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, two iconic PlayStation characters, weren't included, but Naruto and Fat Princess were, does strike me as a little odd. But hey, maybe there was some kind of behind-the-scenes deal going on that we just don't know about. I mean, I know Activision might have the rights to both of those, so maybe back then they had the rights too, and they didn't want to put them in there because they had some other plans. I'm not sure. But either way, I will admit there could have been some stronger additions, but I liked the fact that not every character is from some incredibly famous game. Along those lines, people will poke fun of the game for having a decent amount of third-party characters, meaning characters that are not from exclusively PlayStation titles. These characters include the Big Daddy from Bioshock, Raiden from Metal Gear Rising Revengance, and Heihachi Mishima from Tekken. But last time I checked, having third-party characters isn't a bad thing. People love the fact that Snake, Pac-Man, and Sonic are in Smash, but they're not exclusively Nintendo characters. And now, for the most infamous gripe of all. If you think I'm over-exaggerating, you'd be wrong. People make such a big deal out of this that I saw someone making fun of it 2 weeks ago. It's been almost 7 years and people are still poking fun at this. It's the fact that there are two Cole McGraths in the game, one good and one evil. Cole is from a game called Infamous, where you can go down two paths and become either good or evil, and your in-game abilities will change depending which you pick. Now, during development, Cole was originally going to be one character and became good or evil throughout the match depending on the way you played, but that proved to be too big of a challenge, so they made him into two characters with slightly different movesets. People poke fun, saying, why would you guys put two Coles in the game? Why not just make one character? What a dumb decision. Meanwhile, Smash Bros., a game that uses clone characters to an egregious degree, gets off scot-free and everyone loves it. In Super Smash Bros. Brawl alone, with a roster of 39 characters, 6 of those 39 are just clones of other characters that are in the game. Meanwhile, All-Stars has one clone on the entire 28-character roster, and that's some kind of crime. An even better example is for the latest entry, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Switch, they added a new character, Dark Samus. It's an evil Samus with basically the same moveset as regular Samus, but a little different, and people ate it up. Where's the difference there? There's one good and there's one evil, they're basically the same but kind of different. Oh, but it's fine because it's Smash Bros. One thing I hate in life more than anything is double standards, and boy do people have some when it comes to this game. PlayStation All-Stars is certainly not perfect. The gameplay definitely needs to be tweaked. I would say for a sequel, they should listen to fans for roster additions, but also throw some curveballs in there just to keep it interesting. And they should have the original gameplay style where you knock people out with supers as a game mode, but have the default game mode just be like Smash, where you do percentage damage and have to knock people off screen. You can keep the supers, but just make them do damage and knock people away like they do in Smash. Because let's be honest, it's just a good way to play a party fighter. It's great. Like I said, the gameplay in Smash is tighter, it's better. Besides that, keep everything else. The ripped from their game looks all the characters have are great. Keep the stage designs, keep the little crossover invasions that happen in the middle of matches, and keep the arcade cutscenes. Those cutscenes especially are becoming very rare for even normal fighting games these days, and it adds a lot of charm, especially when we get to see characters from different franchises actually interacting with each other. Unfortunately, I'm afraid all those suggestions are falling on deaf ears. As of June of 2013, it was announced the game had sold over 1 million copies 8 months after release. Due to this, Sony concluded that the game had not sold enough to justify a sequel or making more DLC for the game at the time. More than anything, I wish the game at least got a sequel. I would have loved to see the improvements they made from the criticism they received, and maybe they could have made something even better than before. But at this point, a sequel seems incredibly unlikely. And yet, strange enough, pretty much every year there's always some leaks concerning a sequel. I just saw one from 2 months ago, January of this year. It's very strange to me that for a game that gets so much hate from people, people really like making up rumors about a sequel. It's been happening every year since the game came out. I just don't get why people would put so much effort into something that nobody cares about. Except for me. All in all, PlayStation All-Stars is a decent game with charm to spare. The character models and movesets are all very accurate to their respective characters and franchises, stages have a bunch of personality, and the game makes great use of the fact that it's a crossover. The gameplay could use some tweaking, but that's honestly the only complaint I have with it. I love this game, even if not a lot of other people do. And even though they're always fake, I'll keep an eye on any sequel rumors, because although it will probably never happen, a boy can always dream. If you would like to talk to me more about this, feel free to contact me. I obviously have a lot to say about it, and if you would like any clarifications on some of my points, just let me know. And if a sequel really ever does get announced, you can bet I'll talk about it. So until then, have a good one.
Brace yourself.